So, Kat, it's really great to have you here today. I appreciate your time and your willingness to come and chat about some of your background, your experiences, some of the work you've been doing for the last, I don't even know. That's part of the reason I want to have this conversation. I realized I've known you sort of for a couple of years now, but I really don't know much about your background or how you came to sort of do some of the work you do. Um, so anyway, if you want to give a quick intro to yourself, and then I've got a whole bunch of questions for you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for having me. It is kind of difficult to give a quick intro because I am a multidimensional person in my ways of service in the world. But basically, I'm a yoga educator. I'm a nutritional guide. I'm a recovery advocate, and I work in the field of relapse prevention through using things like food and diet, yoga, breathwork, meditation to help people just kind of live their best lives and be happier, healthier beings, and especially people who've been through trauma and suffer through addictions, things like that. I also work with homeless populations, incarcerated populations. So I try to find kind of the nitty gritty where people need the medicine the most. And also, I do believe in the use of plant medicines and psychedelics, both in microdose, regular microdosing, and macrodosing forms to help people kind of find their center and to connect with themselves, with the earth, with each other, and to kind of shed the skin and the things that no longer serve them. And so, personally, myself, I've been a psychonaut for many years and in different forms, right? Like I told you before, I've been working with psilocybin for at least 2 decades now. More recently, I've started working with peyote in a ceremonial sense and also microdosing, along with a handful of other medicines that I think have been really useful. And I think that each person and each individual kind of needs their own customized way in that. But I do find them to be very helpful. And so, yeah, I'm really happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to some of the questions you have. We'll kind of leave it open and we can go from there.
Yeah. And you kind of already started touching on some of that because, I know bits and pieces just from our various conversations we've had. But then, yeah, as I was thinking about it the other day, I was kind of like, I don't actually really know your story exactly, right? It's like, oh yeah, Kat, she goes to Mexico for 6 months a year, and I don't know what she's doing. She's doing stuff, and she's hanging out in the desert, and she's working with these tribes and peyote ceremonies. I don't know. And then she comes here, and she's doing I don't know what, some other stuff, and then she goes back to
Yeah.
Mexico, and it's like, okay, all right. Um, yeah. So how did yeah, I mean, take me back, right? Like, take me back. How did you end up kind of on this journey of, I don't know what I would call it, wellness, or, I mean, it's an overused word, right? But like,
Right.
because at least what I've gathered from, again, what you've told me, you weren't always like this. Uh,
I feel like part of me always was, but I had to like go way off track and reel it back in to really kind of, which is funny because in the recovery field, they call that the wounded warrior model. Like you really need to get yourself into some shit to be able to bring yourself back. And then when you go to help someone, it's like, yeah, I've actually been there. I didn't just read about it in a book, right? So let's see. I mean, I could take you back pretty far, but let's start around, I guess teenage years. I did get kicked out of high school for drug related charges. And then I lived on the streets for a while. I was homeless. So I was already kind of using cannabis and using psilocybin. And then I got into methamphetamines for a couple years. And then so I didn't finish high school. I ended up getting my GED and got a full ride scholarship to go to the University of Oregon. And there is where I reconnected with yoga and meditation as a tool to stay within my recovery. So I had already at 17. So from 15 to 17, I was using meth and living on the streets and just had this kind of wild life. A lot of things I'm not proud of, but created a lot of mischief. And then when I was in college, I got really into yoga, and I also started studying under the SAP program, the Substance Abuse Prevention Program, which I met a mentor there and he's amazing. He taught the class of alternative therapies using things like music and art and theater in the recovery realm. And also, that's how I heard about the MAPS program, right? The Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies.
So this is
And
when
so
you're like 18, 19 in college,
I
or
was 17 when I started at the U of O, actually, because I was a year younger than everyone in my grade because I had skipped a grade when I was in kindergarten, you know. So I was 17 when I started at the university and 22 when I graduated. So
so
within
you
those
were,
5 years,
so you
yeah,
were,
that's
so you're clean at this point.
yes, I got clean. Like, I mean, the week I started at the U of O, I like got scared straight in something that happened on the streets, and I called my mom and said, "Hey, can I live with you for about a month while I like shift into I want to go to college now. I'm going to take that scholarship because I wasn't going to." So it was actually the first week of the U of O. I was a couple days late entering into my classes because I wasn't even going to take the scholarship, and I decided I think I want to choose that path. It was like that crossroads moment where everything is just like clarity, go. Like now is your chance. And so I took it. Thank the gods. And so, like I said, I ended up studying a lot of yoga and meditation under Sandy Adler, who I don't think teaches there anymore. Um, and I started with the SAP program, and I got into alternative methods of treatment and also studying about group therapy. That's when I started facilitating group therapies. As a student, you know, I was thinking at that point that I would get my CADC, my certified alcohol and drug counselor, CADC 1, CADC 2. I ended up completing my SAP certificate and then just pursuing my yoga path after I graduated and getting certified in 2012 to teach. But I graduated in 2005. So, but the thing is with me is I got clean off of meth at age 17 and started at the U of O, but I went directly to the bottle and found my whiskey. And I was, you know, clean, but not sober. And that's kind of continued, right? But we'll get there because we're still back in 2005. So then I graduated from college, and I was also in the cannabis industry as far as, you know, I had my medical card because I have gallstones. And so another part of my healing path is I found gallstones when I was 7. I had a tumor removed from my leg when I was 13. So I've had these kind of big, like a lot of people in the alternative, especially wellness path, have had some pretty hard things happen personally that they like. I realized I did not want pills. I didn't want surgeries. I needed to seek alternative ways of treatment for physical health, and then later realized also for mental and spiritual and emotional wealth that or wellness that, you know, pills are not the way. So that's kind of my like, I've dedicated my life's purpose to finding other ways to help people through their pain and myself through my pain and all types of dis-ease, if you will, through what can we do to keep people out of pain pills, pharmaceuticals, and surgery, right? Um, so anyways, I had graduated from college. I was deep in a whiskey bottle and cultivating a lot of cannabis for, you know, medicinal. I was a grower for multiple people, multiple patients. I was a caregiver and grower. So I really deeply believe in the powerful medicinal benefits of cannabis. Um, but still I was drinking a lot, and then I had kept my nose clean for, you know, about 5 years and whatnot, and then I started getting into cocaine. I was heavy into the bar scene, so I had this kind of thing going. My joke was I was yoga by day, whiskey by night, you know. And a lot of those nights turned into longer nights, which turned into mornings, and my cycle was rough. I was playing this like ultimate balancing act in like super wellness and then super like professional bar fairy. So, anyways, I got certified. I went to Costa Rica and studied under a direct understudy of BKS Iyengar to continue my yogic path. And then a couple years after that, after getting certified to teach, and I started opening up community classes and teaching at community centers and working a lot with women. Then I took the street yoga program to get certified and trained in specifically working with trauma informed, you know, as a trauma informed yoga educator. So incarcerated folks, addictions recovery, rape survivors, soldiers coming back from war, people incarcerated. So I got training in that and started working through the city of Eugene with working with homeless folks, and started kind of putting my skill set to use in different ways. And then gosh, finally in 2016, I gave up the drugs, gave up the bottle. I just said, okay, I'm actually done. I got myself entirely out of the cannabis industry, entirely out of some toxic relationship that I'd been in for 8 years. And just really got real with myself and said, okay, no more cocaine, no more whiskey. And I went really, really rigid with my health practices for a while. I gave up all caffeine, gave up, I had smoked cigarettes for 15 years. As a yoga teacher, I was smoking after class and like, oh, let's go to the bar, drink afterwards. It was such beautiful hypocrisy, but I had to go through all of that to really like hone in on what was real to me.
So what was it? So what was it that at that point, because I mean, that's a huge shift, right? Like, I
Huge
mean,
shift.
and for you to just be like, boom, I'm done. Right.
Boom, I'm done. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
intense. I mean, to be totally honest, there were a couple different elements that came into play. One of them was I was in a violently abusive relationship. And so my previous partner and I, it got to the point where I was like, I need out of this relationship or we're going to give up alcohol together and see if that, and it turned out it wasn't the alcohol, that abuse continued. Also, there was one point where I think I had talked to you about this incident before when I had taken nitrous and ended up, falling flat on my face. I still have a bump from it. I took brain damage from it. Like, just certain things where I was like, and the inner yogi in me was like, what are you doing? Like, how are you treating your body and your mind and your spirit and your brain like this? And so it didn't click all at once. It was kind of like this successive, these lessons that came in and they came in really clear and I just wasn't listening enough. But for 8 years prior to quitting alcohol, which I'm almost 6 years clean of alcohol now. But for 8 years prior to that, I had practiced no booze November, right? And encouraged everyone around me, my students, my clients, my friends, family to do it with me. And finally, November of 2016 came along. And after November, at the end of November, I was like, no, I'm never going back. This clarity feels way too good. And I started studying about a lot more about my body and my eating habits. Because I had had gallstones since I was 7, I was always a very picky eater. I didn't want anything spicy. I rarely even ate anything that was colorful except for like fruit, I was like no veggies, and especially no greens, like nothing. And I realized the more I read and the more I studied about healthy eating and healthy diet, how much that had been affecting me emotionally and mentally and my brain health and everything, my energy levels. And so now that I had experienced like clean energy without alcohol and drugs and any of that, I thought, oh my God, the better I eat, the better I feel. I got really into, protein powders and all this stuff and really, really, really healthy eating. Almost to a point of like, I went almost overboard with it, especially when then I got certified as a health and wellness coach, probably 2018, maybe 2017, 2018, a couple years after I'd quit alcohol. And I was studying with this, pediatric endocrinologist, and I learned all this sugar. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is like one of the most important poisons and toxins that like everybody's addicted to. I was like, the alcohol is almost just a vessel for the sugar, and every salad dressing and every sauce and everything has the sugar. And I thought, wow, that's actually what's keeping us slow and sick and stupid. And so I said, okay, well, I'm done with sugar. And now, like, I think I had talked to you a little bit about it before. Like, I'll go out to a restaurant. I'm not naive. I know that when I go to Thai food or when I eat a pizza, like, there's sugar in it. But 98% of the time, I'm eating sugar free. And then that kind of you can go very deep down into that rabbit hole because there's 80 to 100 different secret names for sugar that you really have to read ingredients very, very carefully and basically end up with a like raw diet to completely no processed foods at all, and restaurants are pretty much out of the question. So then it goes like really into your social life. Like, I thought quitting alcohol was going to affect my social circle, which it did, of course, but quitting sugar, forget it. Like, you don't go to people's houses to eat anymore. You don't go to restaurants. It's all over. Which I'm okay with. And I can be a little bit more lenient now that I've kind of like gone to the extreme and then balanced back out a little bit. So, anyways, and it's interesting too, because, when we talk about things like plant medicines or psychedelics, it's like one of the big things that, ceremonially people will ask you to go on the dieta sagrada, right, which is like getting off of the sugar, because the plant medicines vibrationally don't work with sugar. Depending on where it's like meat, which I already don't eat. So it's like meat, alcohol, sugar, a lot of the times salt, things like this. Um, it's it's wild how much it's like the diet that I've chosen. I joke about it when I'm preparing for ceremony. I'm like, okay, so what's the one thing? Salt. Okay, no salt, because I already don't eat sugar. I already don't eat meat and don't eat alcohol. And so, but you look at this and it's like, well, why aren't we eating like this all the time? The plants don't like that frequency. Like the medicine of the earth doesn't like that frequency. So why are we so like just consuming all these things all the time that actually take us to a different vibratory level? So that's really interesting to me. But
Well,
yeah,
let
that's
me ask
been.
you let me ask you a question in there.
Uh-huh,
So you're saying that the plants don't like the vibrations of these certain substances, right?
uh-huh.
So so somebody might be watching this and they're going like, what the heck is she talking about? The plants don't like like you know
Okay, so for instance, like you mentioned before, I do travel to Mexico, and while I'm there, I've studied a lot with and about the Wixárika tribe, more commonly known as the Huichol folks. Um, and they are within a specific kind of diamond, their territory in Mexico, and where I live is in the westernmost point of that kind of territory. And I travel each year into the desert of Wirikuta, where where the medicine grows, where the peyote grows, right? So the Wixárika are, they consider themselves the healers of the world, and it's because they work with directly with this medicine, which they call hikuri in their language. And that is what, they receive the messages from the gods to help heal humanity. And so, in people, if you're going to take something like ayahuasca, they'll ask for that kind of a similar diet. But the one in the Wixárika tribe, the one main difference is salt. And why is that? Well, and I've personally experienced this. If I do consume salt before taking peyote or hikuri, it doesn't work as well. Why? There is a scientific backing to that, which I am not well versed enough in this moment to tell you about every different molecular structure and the whys and hows and whats. But I can tell you from my personal experience, if I consume salt before I consume hickory, it does not activate as well. And so whatever it is, and it's on a very specific cellular molecular level that I don't have the words to explain at this moment. And I can look it up and see if I can get back to you on that. But it's very, very specific. And so that for me is like almost the most difficult thing in the world, because it's cheese. I have to go to these ladies in a neighboring village and ask them to make saltless raw goat cheese for me for the whole, because it's 40 days. And it's in Mexico, and for when I do this ceremony, it lines up with Lent, actually, just coincidentally. So for 40 days, and I was, the last year I was already practicing celibacy. And well, that was 2 years ago. And then this last year, I'm living away from my partner, so I'm already not in a position of having to give up sex. But meat, so it's sex, meat, alcohol, salt, and sugar. So for me, the only thing I had to give up was salt, which meant cheese, which is huge for me. As a vegetarian, I'm like, well, I actually get a lot of protein from cheese. So, anyways, but to put it all in a nutshell, the salt in and of itself does not work well with the peyote. The hikuri doesn't activate when you have salt in your system. And so consider 40 days of fasting leading up to this ceremony and these practices. And it's like, if I have a little cheese and then the next day I'm microdosing hikuri, like it's still going to work. But if I'm sitting in ceremony and taking hikuri all night long, praying around the fire, opening up portals, receiving messages, things like that, that's not going to happen if I've been eating salt for those 40 days prior, or even the day or the week prior. So that's to the best of my ability right now that I can explain it to you from my experience.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense, right? There's something about those, whether it's chemical or whether it's energetic or who knows what, right? Or maybe some combination.
Right.
Those things probably aren't separate, right?
Absolutely.
That it's sort of blocking the effectiveness of these plant medicines, or at least of the ones we've been talking about, right?
Right. we're changing our make, you are what you eat. And so if you're eating a bunch of meat, which may or may not putrefy in your system, or if you're taking alcohol, which is, it's just a matter of the energy that you keep. How clean do you keep your vessel? And so if your vessel is already energetically blocked, and you could look at it like, I think we talked briefly about this in our last meeting, you can look at it from the lens of Ayurveda as well. It's tamasic, rajasic, or sattvic food. And so it's going to affect you on all these different levels. It's a lower, heavier vibration, or it's kind of that fluid vibration, or it's a very, very clean and pure, like raw fruits and vegetables, honey, things like this that are sattva or sattvic foods. So I kind of like to think about it through that lens and that's how I understand it, is like, okay, it doesn't want anything processed foods, meat, alcohol, things that are heavy. It's like it wants you to be, if you are pure and clean and clear, then you can be this pure, clean, clear channel for the medicine to work through you. So that's how I like to understand it.
Okay. And so, so what kind of led up to us having this conversation? I mean, hearing your background and everything is great. And I appreciate you sharing all of that. And it's helpful for me to have a broader perspective, right, on kind of some of, what you've been up to. But what actually got us started on this particular conversation was conversations around, I'm going to call it psychic abilities and spirit communication, these type of, I don't know what you call them, skills, abilities that probably all of us have to one degree or another. And, we've had a few conversations about this, and I'm curious, at what point in this journey that you were just describing, where did you first kind of like cue in and go like, oh, wow, like there's something bigger than just me, Cat, in this little body that I can tune into, right? That it's like something bigger than me. Because clearly that's, even the way you were talking about the plant medicines, you're connecting with them on some other level, right? So I'm curious, like, when was the first time that you were like, huh, okay, like, yeah, there's way more going on, and I can connect with this. I can communicate with it in some sort of way.
Right. I think that plant medicines did tune me into that. I think that, I could say that there were definitely like moments in my younger years, maybe, 1 to 12 or 13, that I had tuned into that and already kind of recognized that, which I think we all do. And that childhood kind of sense of wonder, magical activation, if you will. And then I think we kind of lose it when we start getting boxed in and socially constructed. And so then I think I broke out of that. Like I said, I had a tumor removed from my femur when I was 13 years old. And then they fed me a bunch of pain medicines. I totally resisted. And I thought, okay, this is horrible, But that's also when I started using cannabis and when I started using psilocybin, was directly after that, that kind of year of healing and recovery from that surgery. And so then is when I think I really started, when I can remember and fully say that once I started taking these medicines, that I could tune into this greater field of interconnectivity that I think that we kind of shut ourselves down to, especially as we start reaching adulthood, or really, I could say, especially as we start getting institutionalized and educated, right? By schools, by our parents, by authority figures, by whatever it is, I think people start telling us what is real and what isn't real. And, if you kind of act outside of that box, people can, call you crazy or whatever it is. And so we kind of shush ourselves and we kind of, get a little more straight and narrow, right? But when we do take plant medicines that are especially, things like psilocybin that can really just activate, that's why they're psychoactive. It's like it tunes you into a greater level of interconnectedness that already exists. That's why I say it's not like I'm eating a magical mushroom and now I'm magically activated. It's the fact is I'm already magically activated like every other human being on the planet. It just breaks down the barriers of social construction and of ego. And it says, oh, I'm not just me and there's the rest of the world. It's like the individual and the collective. And it takes a little bit off of that individual, like we had talked about, as far as, understanding it from a brain-based perspective is that default mode network or wherever it is that says I am me and you are you, right? It takes that away for a moment and says, oh, we are we and we're one, right? And so it's that magical activation, or call it what you will, but it basically breaks down the fact that I'm an individual in this world and each of us are all different. And it says, oh yeah, there's this interconnectivity that is available to us all the time. It just so happened, and that's why I call plant medicines and psychedelics kind of training wheels to that, because we can access it through Kundalini, yoga, meditation, chanting. There's so many different ways to do it. You know, sometimes people might just be runners and they wonder, like, that runner's high, what is that? It's the fact that you lose whatever else it is. You lose those monkey mind training, like the wheels of thought that are constantly going, and you find yourself just connected to your breath. You know what I mean? It's things like that that can activate us, and every individual has that capacity. I'm not someone special because I've like found myself connected to like nature or God or you or me or everything. It's just that I feel more connected when I'm practicing yoga, when I'm in breath work, when I'm doing my chanting, or when I'm taking psychedelics, when I'm open and in tune and not just living in the mundane reality of like, okay, I am a yoga educator, I work at a university, or I do this or I do that. Right. And so it's just tuning in to the greater field of interconnection that's always available to everyone and all the time.
So it sounds
that's
like
a roundabout way. I'm not sure if I answered your question or not.
I think so. But there's two kind of elements that I wanted to kind of follow up on with that. So one is it sounds like a lot of your lifestyle, your yoga practice, your meditation, your dietary restrictions, all of that is sort of designed pointing in the same direction as sort of tools to keep you open, to help you stay open and connected. Is
100%.
that fair? Yeah.
Yes, that is definitely correct. And I think it's really, that's I think it's one of the most important things that we can do is keeping our body clean and clear in order to be able to stay open and connected and in tune. And, we can be able to receive whatever messages there are, from spirit, if you will, or from the great mystery, or however you want to call it. And the reason for that comes back to this frequency, this vibration. It's like if we're constantly, having to eat, like, how much energy does it take to digest food? So if we're overeating all the time, which especially, I mean, you just look at one country, it's pretty much global. But if we just take a lens and look at Americans and how much we eat, it's not only the type of food we eat, it's the volume of food that we eat. We eat so much, as a whole, as Americans. And a lot of it's meat and a lot of it's fatty food with oils that are unhealthy, and they're creating all these blockages, and all of a sudden we're wondering why there's all this obesity and heart disease and cancer and diabetes, right? And it's because this disease is caused by the way that we eat. Well, how do you think that you're going to be clear enough to like connect to the greater magical activations of spirit talking to you, or the great mystery talking to you, when all of your energy is going to like trying to heal the sickness that you're constantly refeeding your body all the time? And I also, like, we've talked briefly before about parasites and things like this and the bacteria in our body. And so I think a lot of it has to do with how much we're eating and how it's affecting our cells. And then it's, so if you're drinking alcohol all the time and you're eating meat and you're eating too much of it, and then you add all the processed foods and the bad salts and then all the sugars, and then try to go pray and meditate, it's like, well, your body on a real cellular level is still just trying to keep itself from being diseased. You know what I mean? And there's no energy left to just like feel that magical activation, to feel clean energy, to even be open or wants to communicate with spirit. It's a matter of like these vessels, it's the mind body spirit connection. And if our body is so unclean and unclear, there's all these blockages. And you can think about that, from a Taoist perspective of chi running through the body, or a yogic of prana, or life force, vital life force running through the body. And if that's all blocked up, then there's no getting up to like Om Mani Padme Hum, you know? It's just, it's all about your body is still fighting disease instead of your body's like magically opening and active and willing and ready and able to receive messages from the divine and from this
Mhm.
source energy, you know, that is available for us. And a lot of it comes back to addiction, because it's not just substance addiction, it's food and sex and gambling and spending money and shopping, you know, all of these things that, you know, it's anything that just gives us that ding ding reward center in our brain. And so we get so caught up with chasing that in our day and age and the way that we live, that there is no calm, centered, quiet mind space to receive messages from the divine. We're just like, when's my next meal, when's my next, you know, hookup, when's my next consumerism, like I'm going to order something online so I can receive something tomorrow in the mail, or it's just, we get caught in these cycles. And so you can look at it through any of these lenses, but I definitely think that diet and lifestyle have a huge way, and they can either help you receive messages from the divine, or they can completely block you out from that capacity at all.
Yeah, when we were chatting the other day, you said something that really struck me. You know, in terms of, it was in relation to this concept and this idea, right? That, and you just kind of said it when you were talking about the mind, body, spirit, you know, connection, right? And so we've been talking a lot about the body, right, and about diet and, you know, exercise and things like that. But the mind part, and you were just kind of alluding to it, right? Like, what are we paying attention to? Where are we putting our mental energy? If we're always
Mm-hmm.
thinking about, you know, sex or buying stuff or, you
Dopamine
know,
hits, yeah.
yeah, how am I going to entertain myself, right? Like if, you know, all of the images that I'm seeing on social media or on Netflix or whatever, right? That it's like my energy is diverted, and it's diverted into kind of a dense way of existing,
Yes,
which then makes it nearly impossible to tune into anything at a higher frequency.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's it right there. You reflected it back perfectly. That's exactly how I view it, is the more distracted we are, and you know, it's almost like, you know, we search for this sense of wholeness when we're practicing clean diet and yoga, meditation, whatever it is really searching for that sense of wholeness and balance and centeredness, right? Whereas if we're so distracted, constantly stimulated, looking for the next reward center, whether it's through food, sex, gambling, gaming, you know, there's so many ways to be addicted or distracted in this world that yeah, it leaves you with just this. When would you when would you not only find the time but have the energy and the clarity to receive messages from divine source energy or from great spirit or great mystery? Like, it's, we're just caught in that rat race or the hamster wheel or the, you know, the monkey mind or whatever, however you want to give words to it. But it's definitely you know, it's socially and culturally constructed in a way where it's like, that's why they say a lot of the times, like the yogi, the monk, the ninja, it's like about getting out to the mountain, to the cave, to the woods, to like get totally away from all of that just to be able to find yourself, you know? And it doesn't just happen in 1 day or 3 days or 40 days. It's like, especially in modern days, with all the technology and all the everything, you know, I mean, we can go pretty deep into the rabbit hole, but it's very difficult. It's increasingly difficult to be able to disconnect from all of that. And so I think that that's kind of part of these modern day yogis and monks. And it's like, how do we do it? How do we do it with all the tech and all the processed food and all the EMFs and all the check 1 2 3 4? There's so many different types of ways that we can be distracted and that our body, our physical vessel can be harmed just by being outside. Pollutants, you know, your air quality, it's like the water you drink. There's so many different things. And so it's finding the balance of that. It's okay, what's the cleanest water I can drink? How can I breathe the cleanest air? How can I find a balance and be able to get myself out and go to the woods or take a walk outside, connect with nature? Remember that being human doesn't just mean sitting in front of tech and getting my paycheck and paying my rent and buying stuff, you know, and eating and eating and eating and consuming, because there's millions of distractions, but they'll only get you so far. It's very much in that lower level of experience, you know, because I think if you ask someone who's opened their mind to a magical activation, if you will, then they'll be like, yeah, I mean, shopping's cool or like whatever, but have you ever meditated outside alone on a mountaintop for 3 days? Like, whew, that's where it's at, but it's difficult to also live in a modern world and have that be your normal, so it's a difficult balance to achieve, but I think it's worth it to you know to at least practice. That's why everything's a practice, and I don't consider myself a master of anything. It's like I'm practicing all of these things and learning as I go, and it's exhilarating.
So you use the term magical activation or something like that. I think that's what you said.
Yeah.
And so I want to circle back to that, right? And one of the other points that I was going to bring up earlier was when I was asking you when you first kind of recognized that maybe there was something bigger that you could tap into. And it sounded like you directly connected it to when you started working with psilocybin and cannabis.
Yes.
So whenever that was, 13, 14 years old, something like that. And then it sounds like maybe you kind of, lost track of that, and who knows? I don't know. That's part of my question, right? But so given your lifestyle now, and for the last 6 years or whatever, you've been really developing a lifestyle that's conducive to what you're describing. And so I'm curious, how do you feel your, again, for lack of a better term, psychic senses, spirit, ability to connect with spirit, communicate with spirit, whatever that means, has changed in the last 6 years?
I think it's definitely, I'd consider it more of like a clarity. I feel like I've been on the path and then hop off the path, back on the path, off the path, right? That's kind of the dance we do as humans, anyways. And so I feel like since the past 6 years, especially since I gave up alcohol and then processed foods and sugar and all these things, I definitely feel like I'm a more clear channel to be able to receive messages and download messages from the divine source energy, if you will. And I can call it magical activation or being a clear channel. You can call it psychic. I call it more like intuitive abilities or clear connection to the divine source, things like this, because that's what kind of resonates with me more. Like I wouldn't claim to be like psychic, like I know what you're thinking and feeling. And then it's like, okay, well, is there a line between being like an empath and a psychic, Like, do I feel like I have the ability to kind of tune into what people are feeling? Yes. But do I know what they're thinking telepathically? No, like not all the time, but maybe I can open that channel a little bit more. The more clear and the more in tune I am, the less kind of mental chatter I have going on, or the more clear my body is and my mind, then I can definitely clearly tune into other humans, plants, animals, just this whole network of life that we have going on, right? And I think that taking plant medicines, especially microdosing psilocybin and things like this, can help keep that clear channel open. And I do think a lot of it has to do with removing ego from the equation, right? Because that keeps us so disconnected. And so for me, when we talk about psychic abilities or intuition, even, it's more about tuning into what's already there and getting rid of the distraction and the disconnection, because that is always available to us. That whole field of interconnectivity is always available for us. The more activated, the more clear channels we can keep ourselves, mind, body, and spirit, then the more we can tune into that, whether it's receiving messages or telepathy or whatever it might be, intuition, downloading, people channel languages and songs from other cultures that they've never even known existed. It's like, how is that happening? How's that possible? How can we explain it within the realm of science? And through spiritually and magically, we can explain it very easily. Well, there's this field that we can tune into if we're clear. Done. Easy. But scientifically, what's going on there? I'm not one to be able to say. But I can say that the more clear I keep myself through lifestyle, through diet, through activation, through meditation, the more clear I can keep my body, the easier it is for me to meditate. The more clear my prayers become, the more clear that I can channel information that I didn't necessarily even ask for. I just know it. Well, how do I know it? Because it came through dreams, visions, sitting and just receiving, through quieting my mind and being a clear channel. Whereas, all of the blood and energy in my body isn't digesting a big old meat Sammy, and I'm not like numbed down with alcohol. It's like, I'm staying as clearly connected as I can to divine source energy. And that's when I find that I can drop into meditation easier, that I can receive messages through dreams, through visions, through just clear thought, or lack of thought rather, right? And so, yeah, I think that and it's like, and even I've talked to you about this, is over the past 6 years is when I gave up alcohol and when I really started cleaning up my eating and my lifestyle. But I'll go on and off that path. I'm not like strict. Like I was very rigid for a while about it, and that was wonderful and it felt good. But it's like I'm also human. It's 2022. You know what I mean? Like I want to have relationships. I want to have friendships. I want to eat with my family every now and again. I want to experience, delicious Thai food. So it's like I'll go on and off and ebb and flow in that, and I'm okay with that. Because it is all about balance. But I definitely realize that the more clear I keep my body, the more clear my mind stays, the more I feel like my intuition is on point, the easier it is to meditate, the more clear and vivid my dream messages become, these types of things. So it's like, yeah, we can call it magical activation, intuition, clear channels for divine spirit energy to flow into you and through you. I work with a lot of people who go through very tough times. And for me, it's a lot of the times if I just remove my ego and I'm there for someone, being a counselor or just listening and reflecting back to them, it's like the more clear I am, it's like messages will just come through me and they'll be like, wow, that was the perfect, like, thank you for holding space for me in this way. And it's like I feel like I almost removed myself entirely. Spirit just talked right through me, and then they got all the messages they needed to hear. It's almost like a divination. So yeah.
So, I'm kind of getting the impression that, that there's kind of two elements. I'm going to really oversimplify this, right? Like that it's like, yes, you have to take care of the mind and the body, right? So I'm kind of bringing in that third element now. We've kind of talked about the mind and the body and the importance of kind of keeping those things clear and clean as a way to be able to access something else. But then that third element, it seems like there's another piece of where we call it attention, intention. It's kind of like, well, what are you tuning into, right? So it's like, okay, great. You could have the best diet in the world, but if you don't actually pay attention to the fact that you are connected, then it kind of doesn't matter, right? And in that regard, right? I mean, it's still good for your body, but it's like,
Sure.
You also have to tune in.
Yes. Yeah, and you're right. I think it's attention, intention. It's a little bit of both of those. It's where is your focus going, and what is your purpose in doing it? If you're an Olympic athlete, and so you're training and you're eating this diet just so that you can perform your, whatever athletic sport, whatever you're into, that's different, because yes, you're keeping your clean vessel and you're keeping your mental focus. I mean, Olympic athletes, or any athlete really who's really dedicated, is keeping their mind and body so clean and clear. But are they putting any of their attention or intention toward their spirit, toward their soul, toward this great mystery, toward that which cannot be named? You know what I mean? So I think that a lot of it has to do with that trifecta, right? That holy trinity of mind, body, spirit. And so we can keep a clean as body as we want, and, clean mental focus. And if we're not wanting to, it's a kind of like, call it meditation, prayer, whatever it is, that's why I think that, like I mentioned earlier, like the runner's high, like, but are they experiencing like divine messages? Like maybe in a way, like it might flow in and out. But like if someone was an athlete and they really asked for that, if they prayed for that, if they meditated, if they put their intention and attention toward that, toward receiving messages while they're running, while they find that, space where they're not ego attached, then yeah, then you could absolutely call that intuition, and you could call that divine source energy, and what it may be. So I think that and like I said, anybody can tune into this. It's not like one person is special. It's like some people are just maybe honing in on it more, or focusing their attention there more. I think that people who would call themselves mediums, psychics, are definitely like, they know that that's their gift and that's their life purpose. And so they focus on that and they focus on that and they train themselves and they do, you know, whatever it is that they can to keep that ability open and that channel open and flowing. And so I think that, yeah, wherever we put our attention and our intention and our focus is definitely going to open that and expand that skill set a lot more. People who would like have a really closed mind toward that and say that that's absolutely insane, you know, like medicate that person, put them in a straitjacket, get them in a psych ward, you know, they're not going to be as open to that source energy because they may not believe that that even exists. That person, I would say, is equally capable of receiving divine messages if they were open to it, you know. And then I think that there's people whose actual, you know, neural processes are, you know, we talked a little bit about telepathy and autism and things like this. And so it's like there are some people whose brains are wired in such a way physiologically that they might be on a different level receiving messages, you know, like we all have this unique body and these unique minds, and then there's spirit that is not really unique at all, it's all collective. And so depending on how you use your unique body and mind, you can tune into that collective spirit, because there's no like I'm my spirit and your spirit. It's like how we are experiencing the fact that there is one spirit in my skin suit and your skin suit, you know what I mean? And so it's like if we have a certain body or brain type that might activate us in a different way toward receiving messages from spirit, like that's beautiful. If we have a brain or a body that is, you know, it's kind of just what are you using your vessel and in what way? And yeah, how are you focusing your attention and your intention? Like if you want to pray and meditate every day, you're obviously going to be receiving more messages from spirit. Or maybe not, you know, maybe it's like people who aren't even asking for it receive that. I don't know the ways of the great mystery. I just know my own personal experience is that the more clear I keep myself and the more I pray for it, the more I meditate, the more clear I keep my body, the more messages I'll receive, the more I feel divinely connected to source energy. But I can't speak for people who are totally closed off to it. They're not going to have that experience.
So let me
Or if they do, it'll scare them.
right, which also happens, right? Like somebody has some sort of
Absolutely.
experience that they can't explain. And actually, I mean, I've had that happen. Even though I consider myself pretty open, I've, you know, gotten myself into some territory sometimes where I'm like, whoo, this is pretty uncomfortable. I'm not sure I want to be here, right? You know,
Right.
and it's like part of me wants to be there, but part of me is kind of freaked out, and so it's like, you know, so steps out, right? So here's a question to kind of wrap this all up. So you work with a lot of people, you know, in a lot of difficult situations, and you probably also work with people who are relatively healthy, but are wanting to get healthier or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So if somebody came to you and was kind of like, hey, you know, I want to develop my intuition better. You know, I really want to be able to tune in and listen. You know, and we'll just leave it there. Like, what would be like, if you had to pick like the top couple of things, you would say, okay, here's where we need to start. I can guess based on our conversation, but I'm going to ask the question anyway and see what you say.
Okay, so a top couple things. I mean, I'm biased. I would definitely say diet, but also, and not necessarily. I would say a clean diet, and then I'd say meditation and prayer, intending, you know, um, and then spending time. This is kind of, you know, it could seem super obvious or it could be way out there, but spending time in nature, because that is where there is no human social construction kind of judgment, bias, moral, ethical code. It's just nature is what it is, and you get to connect with that spirit immediately, right? So I'd say between keeping your diet clean, right, and you know, freeing yourself from any addictive patterns, right? So a clean diet, meditation and prayer, and spending time in nature. And then you'll find yourself more in tune with yourself. It's more listening. The more you listen to yourself and connect with the natural world, then you can kind of break through all the barriers that keep you from being able to connect to this intuitive world that we live in, or this great, I mean, it really is a full-on inner, it's like this web of connectivity, and we break it down with everything we've learned. So you have to unlearn everything and then start from scratch, stay clear, stay clean, and ask for it, you know
Cool. That's great. So, I mean, this has been really a great conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time, and, really appreciate the work that you're doing, with, the folks that you're helping. I mean, you're working with folks that really, have had some really unbelievably difficult circumstances. And, and they're the same people that society tends to ignore or are worse, right?
right.
Or just actively abuse, right? And so, working with those folks, I mean, that's really, it takes a special person to do that. So anyway, appreciate the work you're doing. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, just gratitude and appreciation for this conversation, and also for the work that you do. I think it's really wonderful when we can fuse the sacred and scientific, and I think that that's a lot of what this particular field of work that you're into right now is researching how to explain all that and how to make it accessible and available. And you know I think that people people will discredit a lot of their magical experiences that they have, whether they're asking for it or not. They'll just be like, oh, I'm just seeing things, just hearing things, and it's like, no, let's listen to those more, and let's put it in a way where science can back that and say, wait a minute, something is happening here. There are, magical activations, there is psychic abilities, there is telepathy happening, there is this interconnected divine source spirit energy flowing through us. You know how can we describe it, how can we explain it, and make it so people can understand it more? So thank you for the work that you're doing, and thanks for your time.